Bob Andelman, host of Mr. Media Radio, and this is one in a series of special Blog Talk Radio shows celebrating the 20th anniversary of Wiley's Dummies instructional books, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com. Joining me for this program is Shamash Alidina, author of Mindfulness for Dummies. Stick around.
It's the world's best-selling reference series and has been enriching millions of lives by making knowledge accessible in a fun and easy way. Welcome to the Blog Talk Radio For Dummies show. The For Dummies series is celebrating 20 years of making everything easier. Join us as we visit with a variety of authors as they explain how they became involved with the series and what the For Dummies brand means to them. Welcome to For Dummies.
Shamash Alidina is a professional mindfulness trainer, teacher, and lecturer. He trained in mindfulness at the Centre For Mindfulness in Bangor, and he has a master's degree in education with a focus on brain and behaviour. Shamash is qualified as a professional coach, and he has a certificate in Counselling Skills. Shamash has been teaching meditation for over 10 years in schools and on university courses. Currently, he works part-time at a London secondary school where he teaches children how to practice meditation. He spends the remainder of his time running mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, courses in London. Shamash Alidina, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Delighted to have you here. We very interested in the topic of your book. It's my sense is that it's still a fairly new topic for most people.
Yes, that's right. Mindfulness is actually a very ancient practice and technique, probably more than 2,500 years old. So for some people it's very well known, but in our Western society it's fairly new, particularly its research side. So yeah, for the West it's a fairly new concept, but it's gaining a lot of ground at the moment.
And where were you in your life that you realized your potential to become an expert on mindfulness?
Well, I suppose the first time I realized I was passionate about mindfulness was actually when I was first taught the technique. I learnt a short mindfulness exercise as part of a kind of Eastern philosophy class that I was studying. It was just about 5 minutes long. But when I was taught the technique and I actually practiced it, suddenly my whole mind felt different, and I actually felt different in my whole being. And this is a bit of a shock for me, because I just assumed that, we think the way we think and we act the way we act, and whatever our feeling is, it kind of is beyond our control. But suddenly I'd learned this little technique that could actually help to clarify my mind and see things in a totally different way within a matter of minutes. So that was probably when the first seed was sown for becoming a mindfulness teacher. And then several years later, I was asked to start teaching mindfulness and meditation, which I did on a voluntary basis, and I really enjoyed it. And that's when I kind of almost dreamt that it would be wonderful to be able to teach this for a living, because I really enjoyed it. But I was just doing it in my spare time.
Yeah, what was your career? I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
So that was the moment when I kind of decided that I'd go on to teach mindfulness full-time. At the time, my career was a full-time teacher, actually, a science teacher.
Oh, so you were open-minded to something different.
Yeah, when I first learned the technique, I was actually going through quite a lot of stress. I was at university studying a degree in chemical engineering, which is quite technical and quite stressful too. And both of my parents are not really religious in a particular sense of the word. They didn't have any particular faith, so I didn't have that grounding. And so I was kind of looking for something different. And when I found this approach or technique of mindfulness and meditation, it helped not only to change my state of mind, but it gave me a deeper meaning about my life. So that's why it was life-transforming when I learnt it.
What was your attitude towards meditation before you discovered mindfulness? Were you skeptical of it, or?
Yes, I was actually. I was very skeptical. I was a typical scientist, and I thought, oh, this is just a bit of mumbo-jumbo, and, yeah. When I was first introduced to the technique, I spent a long time thinking about whether or not I should do it, And the only thing that convinced me was when I looked at research papers and they all kept saying how effective the technique was. So I was quite reluctant to try it, to be honest, because I usually move away from things that seem to be overly esoteric. But having learned the practice and done it, I've changed my mind about that now.
And how would you describe it to someone who maybe is listening to us thinking, I don't know if this is for me or not? It does sound a little esoteric.
Well, if I could explain what mindfulness means, and maybe people could think about whether it's for them or not. The word mindfulness, if you had to define it in one word, I would say is the word awareness. And so we're aware all the time. Right now, you're listening to what I'm saying, and the listeners are listening to what I'm saying. So they're, in a way, being aware of the words that are coming out of my mouth. And in a sense, they're practicing mindfulness, and you're practicing mindfulness already. But the thing about mindfulness is about training your awareness in a particular way. So you bring certain attitudes when you're paying attention to whatever you're doing. So if you're practicing mindfulness at the moment, you'd be listening to what I'm saying, but you'd also be aware of any thoughts coming up in your mind, any judgments, any sense of criticism, and you'd notice that they're just thoughts popping in your mind, and you'd, as best you can, let them go and go back to actually focusing to what I'm saying. Most of the time when we go about doing our normal everyday activities, we're quite judgmental of everything that's going on. Most people aren't aware of this because they haven't really looked. So this judgmental aspect has got a helpful aspect to it, but it's also got certain things about it that are not helpful, particularly if we start judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves. So by becoming more mindful of our everyday lives and what's going on around us with a sense of warmth and kindness and acceptance and curiosity rather than just judging things too much, it helps to actually reshape our brain to be more warm and kind and affectionate, not only towards what we're doing, but also towards ourselves, which has a very emotionally transformative and healing aspect about it. So that's, in a way, that's what mindfulness is all about. It's a way of training your mind to be aware with a sense of warmth and kindness and acceptance.
Would someone who studied mindfulness be less likely to speak before thinking? Would the person who's studied this be more likely to give some consideration to the words that come out of their mouth as opposed to most people who just blurt out the first thing that they think of?
That's right, yes. In mindfulness circles, we talk about learning to respond to our experience rather than react. Most of the time, somebody says something and we just immediately react with some words coming out of our mouths. And those can be often emotional reactions, and sometimes they're helpful, but I've found in my experience most of the time they're unhelpful responses. So by becoming more mindful, we listen to what the other person is saying, and then we notice our emotional reaction, and then we decide, we make a choice. And that's how, in one sense, mindfulness offers you a sense of freedom, because the freedom is about choice. And if you've got a choice as to whether you're going to say something or not, then you are acting in a more free way, and you're more in control of what goes on around you. If you take two people, one person who listens to what someone's saying and responds calmly in that particular situation in an appropriate way, and you take a person who just immediately reacts all the time, the person who responds in a calm way is usually considered more wise and balanced and successful in the long run. So that's what it's all about. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head in that sense.
What kind of person would be a good candidate for mindfulness? Would it be someone who's maybe stressed in the workplace, or perhaps in their personal life has a lot of pressure on them and could stand a good tool to step back from everything, or is there some other kind of person?
Yeah, those people would find it helpful. The type of training that's both in the book and which I teach is a technique called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it's probably the most tested way of managing stress in the world. There's been experiments on it right since 1979 about its effectiveness, and every year the research has almost doubled. So thousands and thousands of research papers showing that it helps to reduce stress. But it's much more than just reducing stress. As I said, mindfulness is about becoming more aware. And I don't think there's anyone on the planet who wouldn't benefit from a greater dose of awareness. And so in that sense, I would say everyone could actually benefit from learning mindfulness and becoming more mindful.
Now, did you say that there are thousands of papers on mindfulness?
Yes.
I would think that would be stressful, writing all those papers.
To read them, it would be, yeah. You don't need to read them. But it's very, very encouraging because it shows that Western medicine, Western society, and the scientific community are really impressed about the findings on mindfulness. It's not just relaxation, excuse me. For example, they've tried comparing relaxation techniques to mindfulness techniques for people suffering from depression. And people who just do the relaxation techniques don't really benefit that much. But when they do mindfulness techniques on the people who have been suffering from depression, they found it's amongst the most effective treatment for people who suffer from recurring depression. And that's why it's now recommended as the treatment of choice by the National Health Service in the UK for people suffering from depression. And that's a huge amount of people. 1 in 4 people suffer from clinical depression at some point in their lives. So a huge amount of people. And so in that sense, mindfulness is just going to grow and grow, become more popular, and hopefully help more and more people.
In your book, which I'll remind folks is Mindfulness for Dummies, you talk about techniques to manage pain and illness as well.
The first time that mindfulness was scientifically tested was actually with a group of patients that suffered from chronic pain. This means it's an acute pain which continues for over 6 months. So sometimes for people who've been suffering from a high amount of pain, not just for 6 months, but sometimes for 6 years or even longer. Now imagine the amount of stress that you would experience if you're continuously experiencing pain. And no matter how many painkillers you take, you're still feeling this sense of pain. So the person who first kind of decided to test this scientifically, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn at the UMass Medical School, put together an 8-week program of mindfulness, meditation, and some yoga. And he found that by the end of these 8 weeks, these people that practiced mindfulness every day had a 30% reduction in their experience of pain. So he tried it again and again, and many times it's been tested and found to be true. And even for people who've finished the course and several years down the line, they still found that their experience of pain had diminished because they felt more empowered and in control of their own thoughts and emotions, and also able to cope with feeling the physical sensation of pain without becoming overwhelmed by it, bringing that sense of acceptance and kindness and curiosity that I mentioned at the beginning of the program.
Is there I was asking you before about good candidates for this. Is there a greater willingness to learn these techniques among younger people or older people, or can you not make that kind of gross generalization?
That's a really good question. I find in my courses I get the whole range, and both male and female too. Quite often with these kinds of things, if people think they're slightly more esoteric, sometimes it tends to attract more women than men, but it seems to be almost balanced. And I also find it's the whole age range. So I've had people who are 18 or 19 coming to my adult courses, all the way up to people who are about 60 or 70 years old. The various challenges that we experience in life kind of affects the whole age range. And because of the recommendations from all sorts of different people as to learn mindfulness, it seems to attract everyone, and many people are open to it. So, yeah, it attracts everyone.
Well, Shamash, let's take a quick break. This is Bob Andelman, host of Mr. Media Radio, and you're listening to a special Blog Talk Radio interview with Shamash Alidina, author of Mindfulness for Dummies. And we'll be right back.
The world's best-selling reference series has turned 20. For Dummies, the Black and Yellow book series has sold more than 200 million books since 1991 and has become not just a bookstore staple, but a practical lifesaver for everyone. Now join them on Blog Talk Radio. Hear a variety of authors involved with the series discuss their areas of expertise, from wine to software, finance, eBay, and even Dr. Ruth and Sex for Dummies. Visit the For Dummies channel, blogtalkradio.com/For Dummies.
And this is Bob Andelman, host of Mr. Media Radio, and you're listening to a special Blog Talk Radio interview with Shamash Alidina, author of Mindfulness for Dummies. Shamash, I have to ask you, we talked a little bit about your own hesitation in getting involved with mindfulness early on as a scientist, and I'm sure we both know that there are people who hear the word meditation and they want to run in the other direction. Can someone do this without feeling embarrassed?
Absolutely. In fact, I think the fact that we use the term mindfulness rather than meditation is some consolation for people, and they're more willing to try it. And that's because there is a difference between mindfulness and meditation. Meditation is something that people try at just kind of one point in the day, whereas mindfulness is a technique, a way of living that you approach from moment to moment, and it can be practiced at any time. So if people have got some negative connotations about mindfulness and about meditation and feel that meditation is not for them, then they can always try this, what we call mindfulness. And it's just a matter of paying attention. That's all it means. So if you're paying attention, we pay attention all the time. So it's just a way of training your mind to pay attention. So if you're kind of got these negative ideas about meditation, think of mindfulness as a form of mind training and look at it from the scientific perspective as I did, and just think of it as a way of training your mind to be more aware and awake every time. And because you're more aware and awake, you can make greater choices about what you do, where you go, how you act, and how you behave. So it will give you a chance to be more in control.
My teen daughter saw the book lying on my desk and borrowed it for several days and was very interested in it. So I'm going to guess. I don't know that you'd agree. I'm going to guess that younger people might be a little more open to it because they haven't created all these prejudices against certain types of things that maybe older people have. But maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, you may be right. Generally speaking, the younger generations, perhaps not teenage, but slightly older than that, they've suffered a bit in life and they're looking for some other way to get out of it, and so they're willing to try something new. So perhaps you're right, although I have found that I've had the whole age range in the classes that I've taught.
Now, your book comes with a CD. Can you tell us a little bit about what's on it, what it adds to the book?
Sure. The CD almost completely contains mindfulness exercises and meditations, and they are different lengths of time. So there's one which is just 2 or 3 minutes, which is called a mini mindfulness exercise or a mini meditation, and that's really useful for people who don't want to dive in with the long mindfulness exercises. You just play that 3-minute audio at any time during the day, and it helps you to feel a bit more mindful and awake, and helps to reduce the stress a bit. Then there's some 10-minute mindfulness exercises, and it ranges all the way up to a 30-minute body scan meditation, as it's called, which is done in the lying down posture, and you just play the audio, and it kind of goes through each part of your body very slowly and very mindfully. And if you practice that every day for a couple of weeks, that's a really good way to test out if mindfulness is something that you want to pursue. The 30-minute body scan takes quite a bit of time, but if you're really interested in learning a different way of living and want to test out this technique, which has been proven to be so effective for thousands and thousands, perhaps millions of people, then that's a good one to go for. There's also a walking meditation there, so you could play that. It's about 7 minutes, and just try it out in your home. And if you like it, you can apply that technique whenever you're walking from one place to the other, so you can bring a more mindful awareness to your walking. So rather than thinking about all your worries and concerns about the future or irritations about the past, you can come into the present moment, the here and now, by practicing mindful walking.
Now, people who buy the book, and I'll repeat again, it's Mindfulness for Dummies. These books tend to be introductory in a lot of ways, and then more and more information the further you get into the book. After someone has purchased the book and gotten through the book and they're excited by it and they're very interested in, where would they turn next? Where would they go for more experience, more understanding, more practice?
Yeah, as you say, it's a great first step to read the book and listen to the audio, but I would recommend that people have a go at doing one of these mindfulness courses once they've finished reading the book and they're interested in learning more. The courses that have been tested, as I mentioned, thousands of times. If they're in London, then I can teach it to them, but I actually also teach it through distance learning, either on phone or over Skype. And so the way that works is that there is a phone call once a week for about an hour, and we talk through a particular concept of mindfulness, and I do some guided exercises, which includes a little mindful eating exercise, eating one raisin in a very mindful way, which people find quite amazing. And then I set some home practice, listening to particular mindfulness exercises, and the idea is you practice it for a week, you call back, and then we talk about how that went for you, and then you learn a new mindfulness exercise. And that continues for usually about 8 weeks. And that's the length of time that people really need to integrate mindfulness into their life and in their being. And after those 8 weeks, if you find that it worked for you, then you can continue to practice. And if you didn't like it, you've given it a good test, and then you can just leave it and do something else. So I would recommend doing a mindfulness course. So one of two, either mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT. They're the two courses that have been fully tested and found to be very effective.
Very good. Well, let's change topics slightly. And tell us how you got involved with the For Dummies book series.
Sure. The first Dummies book I read, I think, was CBT for Dummies, and I found that a really nice introduction. And I read one or two Dummies books, and I found them to be really, really good. And that's how I got introduced to it, actually. Yeah.
And so that's how you learned about the series. How did you become an author in the series?
Yeah, so I was actually visiting my brother in New York, and we were standing in the apartment. I remember it quite well, and we were just having a conversation about books, and I was looking to write my first book on mindfulness, and he suggested, he actually asked, is there a Dummies book on mindfulness? And I thought, that's a really good question. I think he'd read one or two of the Dummies series too. So I looked it up, and I found that there wasn't one. So I got in touch with the editors, and they were actually looking for an author of mindfulness at the same time. They'd approached one or two authors, and it had been unsuccessful. So we had an interview within a week, and I put some proposals together and wrote a sample chapter. And they were really pleased with what we got, and the sales team were happy to go ahead. And so that's how it happened.
And have you developed a following as a result of this book?
Yes. As I started writing the book, I'm quite a keen user of the online social networks like Facebook and Twitter. But I didn't know how popular it would get, so I just started just saying to a few friends, I've made this page, join up if you're interested. And as I was writing the chapters, I was engaging in conversations with people, and gradually, every week, a few more people joined, and we ended up with thousands and thousands of followers on these groups. And I've actually kind of made really good friends with the people on these online communities, and I put a quote on every day or a statement or a question, and it stimulates really fascinating conversations with people who are suffering from chronic pain, anxiety, stress, tension, or just interested in mindfulness. And all these people, you kind of create a community and a conversation, and yeah, it's great. I really enjoy it.
Is this very different than you imagined your career going?
Not really. I mean, I did want to teach mindfulness for a living, as I said. I didn't know I'd be writing a Dummies book. I was hoping to, at some point, write a book on the topic. But I must say, I've really enjoyed writing the book, and I've had so much positive feedback. I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to write it. and it's really been it's been an honor and a privilege to be involved in it.
What became of your science career, which is where you started?
Well, I find mindfulness is almost a scientific way of looking at our own minds and hearts. So I'm really interested in when I practice mindfulness and I have conversations with others about what they think and what they feel and their emotions. So although I was very interested in physics and engineering at a slightly younger age, and I still am, that same aspect of curiosity has turned from the outward curiosity of the way things work to an inward curiosity as to how emotions and thoughts and bodily sensations, actions and relationships are all interconnected. And I find that really fascinating. So, in a sense, it's just as scientific as it was before, but rather than being turned outwards, it's turned inwards for me. So, it's really interesting kind of combination of the two. But it works for me. It makes sense to me, anyway.
Mindfulness is it seems like a fairly serious study, but the Dummies books sometimes have a very light touch. Did you have any difficulty balancing the two?
I did a bit, actually. As you say, it's quite a serious concept. Well, in a sense that people use it for serious illnesses, chronic diseases. So in that sense, I had to be really careful, and when I write, I didn't want to patronize anyone or make light of something which could be a serious medical condition that people are dealing with. But at the same time, I think an aspect of mindfulness is to be light-hearted, and if you're too serious in your own practice of mindfulness, then it's not really very effective. So that's why I was so pleased to write a dummy book on the topic, so that I could bring this light-heartedness to it. But it was quite challenging, and I was very grateful to the editors who are very good at looking out for which jokes would be appropriate and which ones wouldn't be. And they suggested some little light-hearted comments in the book, which turned out to be brilliant too. So, with their help, I think it's turned out to be just right.
Well, Shamash, before we run out of time, I just wanted to ask you about your general experience working with the Dummies team at Wiley, and just in general, has this been a good time for you?
It's been a really, really good time, so much so that I'm involved in writing another book with the For Dummies series. I think I'd just like to say congratulations to the fact that you guys have made it to your 20th anniversary, and the fact that that's no accident, especially in the competitive environment of publishing. The team that I worked with were really kind and helpful and really supportive, and I can't kind of see how they could have been any better, to be honest. And I'm really saying that from the bottom of my heart. I'm not surprised that it's such a successful series, and now I know why it is so successful. It's because of all the people that I've both met personally and worked with on the phone and email. They've been really polite and intelligent and really supportive. It's really, really nice and encouraging to see.
Well, I'm sure they'll be very glad to hear that. And folks, listen, you can learn more about the 20th anniversary of Wiley's For Dummies book series at www.dummies.com. Shamash, before we go, do you have a website that you'd like to point people to?
Yeah, thank you. My website is learnmindfulness.co.uk. Learn, just the word learn, L-E-A-R-N, mindfulness.co.uk. Or they could always just type my name.
Okay. Well, Shamash Alidina, author of Mindfulness for Dummies, thank you so much for joining us on this special Blog Talk Radio report celebrating the 20th anniversary of Wiley's Dummies instructional books. And folks, if you'd like to sample Mr. Media Radio, please give our regular show a listen, www.blogtalkradio.com/MRmedia, Mr. Media. And this is Bob Andelman, and thanks for listening, everybody.
You've been listening to For Dummies, a celebration of 20 years of making everything easier. Join us next time as we visit with a variety of authors as they explain how they became involved with the series and what the For Dummies brand means to them. And visit us online at blogtalkradio.com/4dummies.